Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus.
Hey everyone, welcome back to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Aubrey Coleman, one of the hosts for the podcast, and today we're looking at the book of 1 Thessalonians. The first book of Thessalonians is an affectionate letter to the church of Thessalonica as described by Paul himself. We cared so much for you that we were pleased to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you had become dear to us. 1 Thessalonians 2:8. As detailed in Acts 17, Paul and Silas visited Thessalonica, and after 1 month, many Jews and Greeks began to follow Jesus and joined together as the first church there. Caesar, their king, did not like the idea of his people worshiping another king, and therefore instituted extreme persecution of Christians, to such an extent that Paul and Silas had to flee the city. This is one of the earliest letters written by Paul, and the first chapter opens with a prayer of thanksgiving for the perseverance of the Thessalonians. Paul heard news after his departure that they were doing well, even despite all the challenges, and he likely wanted to reach back out in a letter and encourage them. He recognized their faithfulness to the work of the gospel, their love for others, and their ultimate hope in Jesus. The first 3 chapters are really centered around a celebration of faithfulness of the Thessalonians. Paul recounts the story of how they initially came to faith during his time there and how they had previously worshipped idols, which was the common practice in Thessalonica. Because they received the good news of the gospel, transferring their allegiance to King Jesus, it would come at a great cost. They were isolated, treated with hostility, and they would experience extreme persecution. But to them, it was all worth it to follow Jesus. While Paul was there, he developed dear relationships with the Thessalonians and taught them God's word and what it meant to live a godly life. Inserted in this portion is a reminder from Paul that godly leadership is not manipulative or with deceptive intentions, but it's about having relationships and leading out of love for people. Then Paul moves on to discuss their shared persecution and suffering. Just as Jesus was persecuted, Paul is being persecuted, and now the Thessalonians are being persecuted. Any suffering for the sake of the gospel is sharing in the sufferings of Christ. After Paul left, he worried that things could get worse and the Thessalonians would be unable to endure the circumstances. He longed to return but wasn't able to, so he sent Timothy to strengthen and encourage the church. When Timothy returned back to Paul, he shared a good report and remarked that the Thessalonians were actually doing really well. Paul was overjoyed at the news and prayed for ways to return and fellowship with them again. The last 2 chapters look to the comfort and joy of Christ's return. In chapter 4, Paul offers a reminder to the church that we're called to live in a way that pleases the Lord and to be sanctified, as they are already doing. He encourages them to flee from sexual immorality and honor God with their bodies, to love one another, to live a quiet life, to work diligently, and to be a faithful witness to everyone, and to encourage one another as they await being caught up in the clouds with the saints of old at the Lord's coming. The time and date is not known, but he will come like a thief in the night. Once this happens, destruction would come to those living in darkness, like childbirth pains, and they would not escape. Christians, however, will not be surprised by this because they live and walk in the light. Paul exhorts them to remain alert and self-controlled, putting on the armor of faith and love and the helmet of salvation, waiting with hope. He encourages them to comfort and help one another, to pursue what is good for one another as the day draws near. Chapter 5 ends with a series of exhortations to respect one another, to live in peace together. Then, Paul exhorts them to rejoice always, to pray constantly, and to give thanks for everything, because that is the will of God in Jesus Christ. To test all things, to stay away from every kind of evil, and hold on to what is good. Paul concluded his letter by praying that God would sanctify them completely, and that they would be kept and preserved until Christ's return. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Be sure to follow along with our Instagram pages at Daily Grace Podcast and at The Daily Grace Co. And check out our website, www.thedailygraceco.com, for all kinds of resources to help you dive deeper into God's Word. Thank you again for listening, and we look forward to chatting again with you tomorrow.